So some people like visuals. People learn differently. They absorb information differently. What we've learned is that working with remote people in particular is understanding how they absorb information first. And so then when I'm trying to push a new people initiative or do anything, I'm hitting all of those ways of learning. So often you'll have the same piece of information from me. It might be the same policy or it might be the same change that we're making, both written in Slack, mentioned in all hands or any of the all company get togethers with a Loom video and a reminder later on via email. So I'm trying to hit every single point so everyone can absorb that information in the way that they need to be able to adopt it and think about it and to get the buy-in. And I always just use the same principles. So it is what, why, and then the how. So what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then the how, the process. So really, most of the time I've noticed people lead with the how, they lead with the process and what we're changing or what we're doing, but there's no kind of context behind it. So we really try to state at the beginning, like, what's the problem and what we're doing to solve it, and like the why around the method that we've chosen and how we're going to implement it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Freedom of Work podcast. I'm Leah, and I'm the host of this podcast. If you don't know before, you're going to be known now. So we're going to be diving into things about the future of work, remote culture, building better workplaces. And in today's episode, it's all about designing employee experiences with the same intentionality of bringing what we do to products. So touching on things like employee journey, like the product lifestyle, finding those sparks of joy and using feedback to continuously improve what we build for people. So I'm joined by Selina. Thank you so much for joining me, Selina. I'll let her introduce herself properly. So yeah, welcome to the show. If you want to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, recent roles, and yeah, what drew you to this kind of work.
Hi, thanks, Lee. I am head of people at Monolith AI. Then just joined. And prior to this, I was a scientist back in the day. So data really is my go-to and my love language. But I found the people sphere by accident, actually. I decided academia wasn't where I wanted to be. And I went to Glastonbury Festival. I met some people there who are working in exec search, who introduced me into the world of exec search, but for life sciences. And I started working with venture capital really closely in early stage businesses. So I was really excited by helping, like, how impactful people could be in shaping early stage businesses. So I was working with Imperial Innovations and a few others before joining startups. And I've been in the startup early stage field for helping businesses from pre-seed all the way up to kind of Series B and beyond for about 8 years now in London, all global businesses. And I've sort of developed a real deep interest in designing the employee experience with the same intentionality that we dedicate to building great products.
Yeah, I think that this sort of talking point is so interesting, because if you can do that, because the product's the thing you want to sell, you want to be successful. And if you can do that for your people team, they're only going to be successful as well. So I think it's a really sort of good mindset to have there. And really interesting the way you come from this sort of scientist background, because you're sort of having that an analytical mind to sort of analyze it in a different way. And I think that's really sort of shifted that viewpoint to create that look on how you make that people teams. But sort of, if you're saying that it's like a product, then what do you think it means for then people teams to then start thinking like product managers?
Yeah, I mean, so this is something that I picked up during my time at Founders Factory. So Founders Factory was a corporate fund that invested in early stage businesses. Either they came up with the ideas to build these businesses, or they invested via the accelerator. And they had loads of operators within the fund. So every single person that I worked with were incredibly smart and brilliant at what they do, but they'd been in startup businesses, seeing what's gone wrong, what's worked, and then they were helping the businesses. And from my background, I came very much from like the people sphere, and I was really focused on just looking at like the people experience and how I can help businesses from there. They actually paid for me to do my CIPD, so I can really have that kind of frame of reference to ensure that I'm advising in the right way. But throughout that time, you kind of sat with all these different leaders in these different fields, and I was sat a lot of the time with the product people. And what I loved was the way that they gathered data to really inform every decision that they make. And they did little experiments. They were able to move really quickly and change things quite rapidly. Whereas traditionally with the people things, everything that we do it's pretty slowly time. Because it impacts every single person in the business, takes a long time to get into motion. So I was wondering, how can we start to adopt some of these principles in the way that we work? So it really is a totally different mindset. What we're doing instead is what we're thinking about is that end-to-end employee journey. So that comes from them first seeing a job advert from us all the way through to a promotion, and mapping out that employee journey and all the different touch points, and then getting information about those. So doing employee interviews, seeing what's working, seeing what's not, and then doing little experiments to see how we can iterate and improve those little areas in each time. So by understanding your users, and when I say users, I'm talking about employees. So I was speaking to someone recently who really didn't gel with this idea. They were like, I'm not a user, I'm an employee. And I was like, yeah, traditional HR, they think of you as human capital. So they're only thinking about money.
Yeah.
So it's not even the same. Whereas what I'm saying, I know it's a user, but I'm saying you're the user of my product, which is the culture and the people
Yeah.
experience. And by thinking of you as that, I could build with purpose. What we're building matters. We're listening to you to make it better. So yeah, you can tweak the words to align to fit what people like, but I think it's really important that you see people as like using your product, as it were, your culture, because what we're trying to do is help them keep subscribing to you and not churning and leaving to go elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I think also sort of a lot of teams sometimes stand quite alone. And I think having that integration with the different teams makes you really think differently. And especially with you being with the product team, like think in such a different way than other teams, because they've got to specifically look at the journey of that and the different touch points and relating that to the employee. I think is such like a niche changeover, but it really does work if you're looking at it as a user. So just from the onboarding or the job description, as you says, that's the user activation. So that's them signing up to the product or finding the right thing that they want to buy. So that initial onboarding is that, and then utilizing that data from the get-go to change how you want that then onboarding experience to go for each individual, I think is really like cool niche way to look at it. And I think it makes you analyze it in more of a specific way.
No, I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. So I think it sort of makes you look at it at a way of, if say someone joins a company and they're sort of going down a route, but then something different happens, and then that's exactly what's going to happen with a user. People are going to go in different angles, or people are going to start a role and actually realize, oh, maybe I like to speak to people directly, so maybe I'm not so much of a marketer, maybe I now need to go into more sales, and analysing that data and continuously changing what that employee maybe is doing for themselves is a really good way to look at that from the get-go.
It really is. And I think there's always, with product people, you always see there's like a healthy tension between like product sales and engineering. because they're advocating for the end user, but they're probably, it's a little bit challenging sometimes. They're pushing back against some of the other teams, but they're seen as the connective tissue between these teams. And I think the people team is that for the rest of the business, right? We touch every single person in the business. And so so it may cause a bit of tension sometimes when we bring things up or we're saying, let's say there's a problem with retention. Initially, like the traditional way of thinking is like, okay, we need to fix retention. And we go straight in and be very reactive. And this way of doing it is thinking, actually, what part of the life cycle are there gaps? What is the bits that we're missing that we need to improve on? So we can, build a better process. And every single thing, every policy, every process, everything that we do is either going to build trust or break it. And so we need to make sure that we're constantly building on trust. And it just means we're just doing things slightly differently. And yeah, hopefully it means that we become less reactive, because I know every single people
Yeah.
person I speak to is always has their list of nice to have things that they'd like to do and the things that just come in daily. But it means
Yeah.
hopefully we can reduce some of those to build, features and things that last.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well. Like this sort of trust element, psychological safety is something that every business, HR, team, manager, leadership all want to have. But yeah, as you said, these tasks can come in fast and someone might leave and people might need to fill that role quicker than they have enough time to be able to sit down and go, okay, so how long was this person in this role? What were they enjoying in this role? What were they finding difficult? It's like, well, actually, no, we're currently in the middle of this massive project sprint that needs to be completed by next month. So we need someone in now. And it's like trying to find that balance is difficult for a HR team because you have to find out maybe what tools were they working, what tools do they no longer need, assessing that from a very get-go because that can save the business money. Maybe they had not enough tools they need to look at. Do they need more tools to do the work? Is that why they left? Was there certain drop-off points? Did that employee maybe 3 months ago sort of stop replying on Slack messages? Were they disengaged? And having a look at it from not just the fact that they've left the business, is this certain other, as you said, touch points prior to them leaving that impacted on that, and then having a look and analysing that data and bringing it back to, okay, actually, they were disengaged, they had too much workload on, they didn't have the tools for it, and that's exactly why they left. So finding those touch points is only going to make the next hire for that role more suitable, more like being able to succeed a lot more. And I think that's really where we need to be analysing and looking at that data. So yeah, I really like that. Just making sure you are keeping an eye on, even if the touch point is them leaving, there's got to be a few factors that got them there as well. So in terms of then, as we're speaking about these touch points and sort of like the strategy for this and looking at it as an overall employee journey, let's say, is there like a framework or anything that you look at and assess when you are planning that employee experience?
Yeah, so I think there's a few that, and again, I've stolen these from other people that have done this a million times before, but in different areas. So one that I use a lot actually is journey mapping. And so really mapping out that employee journey. So every single part. And I usually just break it up into like attraction, recruitment, onboarding, growth, and then promotion and exit. So keep it quite simple. But in each of those places, like, what are the touch points that we have with them? And so to your point, you know, are we checking like their engagement levels during employment? Are we seeing if they are filling out the EMPS? Are they going being prepared for each one-on-one? What are the managers saying? Like all of these different touch points that we have as a people team. And then we can use that employee journey map to then start thinking about like what areas probably need to have a bit of attention. And then what we do a lot of, and what I've been trying to instill in my team, is employee interviews. And we try to work in like sprints. So we get inputs for our people roadmap from two different ways. So first, with the EMPS, we have the standard EMPS question, but then we also ask for feedback on areas of the people experience that we think we probably want to get a bit of attention on. And also, we have an open door. So I have an open door, like anonymous. You can ping me anytime and ask if there's anything that you need help on or that you want to see, or maybe you've seen in another company and you thought, you know what, they do really, this is really cool that what they do there. You can send those ideas over. But then also we do these employee interviews. So we do stay interviews every 6 months with every single person in the company. And we share that between me and my team. And what that entails is essentially what you would normally ask in an exit interview. But what we're trying to do is, instead of waiting till the end to say, what can we do to make you love us more? We're actually having more of a conversation around, what do you like about here? What don't you like? What can we do to make it better? It's really simple, very informal, but we get all of that information. And then from there as well, we can then say we have the specific employee interviews. And this is when we are gearing up to kind of test and iterate like something that we want to launch. So let's say performance is an issue. It's not measured very well in the business. Managers are complaining they don't know how to do performance management. Rather than just launch a whole performance management process, we'll do specific interviews to see how it will work for employees and what they'd like to improve, and test, before we kind of come up with a hypothesis and then test it and iterate on that hypothesis. All of that information, every single thing that we get, gets fed into our people roadmap. And I think it's really important that your roadmap is public, because then you can really see, and everyone can see what you're working on. You have that transparency, but it also builds in accountability. So the reason I have this is because, it may matter to one employee, compensation. That's something that's really important to them, that they think we really need to look at and that we need to work on. But if the majority of people are worried about progression, that's the thing I'll focus on first. But they can see in the roadmap that on my backlog, compensation is there. So they know that we're listening, or we are going to action things. And there is a timeline attached to everything. Because I think the worst thing that can happen is you can come in and you get change fatigue. People come in, you've suggested loads of stuff, and some of the changes are happening, but some of the changes haven't been communicated, or some of the other points haven't been communicated, and the justification hasn't been communicated. And so we may go back on a decision and everyone gets frustrated again because they're changing again. So it's all about explaining every single finding and all of the data, and making sure that people know that anything that we do is because we're listening to the majority, and we're avoiding confusion further down the line by being very clear on what we need to focus on, what matters to the business, and also why. Why do we do it?
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing, isn't it? I think coming back to that element of trust is exactly what this is, having a public roadmap that people can actually see. So I think sometimes the thing with giving feedback about people's jobs and ideas can be a little, people get a little bit worried about saying something that might not be what anyone else is thinking. But if this is public and everyone's saying, oh, actually loads of people have said about progress on there, so it's not just me, it makes them feel a lot more happy to contribute in the future, which means that you're only going to get people giving more feedback, and you're only going to be able to create that roadmap better in the future. And I think that then builds more trust and transparency, because they're seeing what's coming, why it's coming, and people can get involved in that, and they can see that they're going to be an ongoing priority to the business. It's not just like, oh, we've had this survey and you put quite a lot of effort in. You think, oh, actually, yeah, I really do think I've seen this business doing this. I'd like to do this, or really want this tool, or a benefit if it was a remote working company, a benefit of a laptop for example. But yeah, then if you put that feedback on and you don't actually see anything at all being registered or see anything progressing with that, it makes you lose trust in the company, because it's like, I've actually put in a lot of effort to be part of this and show you where I want to be in the business. And if you can't show that that's something that's going to be progressing, then it can, cause like low retention to drop off, and people don't want to be focusing on that. They'll just go back to, oh, well, they don't care about me. So
Yeah.
you don't really want that. So I think having that public roadmap, but also making sure, I think there's a really key word that you said there, which was the change fatigue, because you can have all these different initiatives and these really big ideas, but it can become exhausting if every so often say, right, we're doing a 4-day working week this week, then we're going to go back to a 5-day working week, and then we're going to have half the business actually trial the other 4-day working week again. It's like, well, actually, I have a meeting with them on a Friday that we always do, and it can become convoluted and no one knows where they're currently standing. And I know that's just an example, but the, the pace can change. And if you wanted to do a project with someone, and I think it's good to change and find different ways of doing stuff. But yeah, change fatigue can definitely be exhausting to the employee. And that's the last thing that you want if you're trying to create a new initiative that's going to only better them for their future. So yeah, I really like both of those things, like bringing the roadmap public, making sure that's out there so people can trust you, be involved and show that it's actually doing something. But yeah, making sure that if you are putting some stuff into action, that, as you said, it's a journey. It's not a sprint where we're going to be analysing things and measuring the data and putting forward things in like smaller pieces rather than just all at one, putting it, and suddenly you've got 17 benefits, a 4-day working week and 3 laptops delivered to your house. But yeah, I think that really does sort of sets the scene of what that looks like for HR team and how that you can sort of make that into employee experience, definitely.
And I think it's really important as well when you're doing those employee interviews that you get like a really good range of different employees, because one thing that we had done, which is like I've learned in hindsight was probably not great, was we had also a culture committee, which was some volunteers, all volunteers who wanted to help build and improve the people experience, because we're a team of 3.
Yeah.
We're quite a big company. We couldn't action everything on our roadmap. So we asked for, culture champions essentially. But because we were asking for the volunteers, often it's the same type of person that volunteers. It's someone who's gregarious, who's usually, actually happened to be office based. Most of them ended up being that rather than the remote team, or from everything that was non-engineering, because they tend to be a little bit more extroverted. So you get a bit of a biased people experience if you're listening to just those voices. So what we did is we took a step back and actually we picked people. We intentionally picked people. We actually picked more people who were in the remote team. We were hybrid. This was at Sideways 6. And so we had about 50-50 of the company remote and in the office. But all of our meetings and the way that we worked was remote first, obviously, to ensure that the remote people don't feel like they are getting an unfair experience in our meetings or in the way that we work. However, because of the nature of how we were before, sometimes when we were trying to do celebrations or the things that we were looking at, we weren't necessarily thinking about what was best for the whole company. And so when you're doing these interviews, we did try to balance our insights for the remote team. And we
Yeah.
realized there was, as an example, one of the things we were doing with onboarding is we want to spark joy. We want to get people excited before they join. So we were sending little gifts and like getting their laptops and their little notes out, signed by the CEO. But with remote team, we actually originally had an office in Belarus. When the war broke out in Ukraine, there was a lot of displaced employees. So we did a lot of work helping them relocate and ensuring that we can still work together. But that comes with a lot of complications because suddenly we've gone from maybe 3 or 4 jurisdictions to a hell of a lot more. And how do we
Yeah.
keep that onboarding joy and that experience consistent when we're sending things to Turkey or Georgia, where it was really tricky for us to send things in time? So we had to kind of go back to the basics and be like, actually, what does matter when you're onboarding? Is it those little tokens and gift boxes, or is it actually that they are made to feel super welcome, that they know what to expect, that there's no surprises, that we are very upfront and honest about our culture, and that they have that psychological safety, to your point earlier, at the beginning? Like, what are the other things we
Yeah.
can do? So, that's another way that we have to rethink how we did these employee interviews and bring in that feedback to make sure that every single person has a consistent experience.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in remote working. It's like if you, as you said, this culture committee. It's an amazing idea in when you're thinking about it, because you're getting loads of people to be part of it. They're the people that you think are experiencing it. But yeah, as you said, those personalities that want to be involved are going to be sort of the same groups of people. And then relating that to the remote workers is where it's going to become tricky and convoluted. So the culture experience the other people are having is not the same as those remote people. So that onboarding process and that whole employee experience is going to be completely designed in a completely different way. So having to look at that from all different angles, especially as you said, from remote first company, it can be difficult, and when you get it right, it works really, really well. But I think getting it right can sometimes be quite difficult. So having it aligned with this sort of design as a design process rather than an employee process makes you think about those different points of when they're receiving a gift. That's something maybe that, like the discount code that you'd get, for example, but having it aligned in those two things is makes you look at it like a specific process rather than, oh, the culture team have said this, for example, then it doesn't align with everyone in the business. Yeah. And selecting different people from different teams and having people from the engineering team, leadership team, marketing team, sales team, having those different voices, I think is really essential to building that designing the process to be something that is your EVP, because your EVP is what everyone's chosen to work for your company in the first place. So that means they are resonating with your values. You just need to make sure you're constantly evolving your EVP, because that's going to change the more people you hire, the more products you get, the more countries you go to, etc. It's going to be evolving constantly. So if you keep at that EVP from 10 years ago when you had 10 of the office people and 5 remote people, to now when you've got global people in Georgia and places that are a little bit more difficult to get to or are spread across the world, then again, people are going to start losing that connection that they initially had when they first were a user, as you said. So I think constantly, like you do with a product, evolving and changing that mindset. You can't just stay at the initial mindset or the initial HR goal that you had. It's going to keep changing, like a product is, to suit the needs of the growing environment, the evolving technology, the global workforce. So I think it's really key to look at it from a really global standpoint as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a massive, massive fan of like rituals as well. And like going to your point about the values, like those embedding them when you're small obviously is very easy. You know, you're all there, it's easy to kind of have those touch points with everyone. But it's thinking about how can we consistently do that as we grow and scale and like you said, things do change. So for me, I love the idea of building in like rituals and having your own kind of company language. I love it when you're in a company and you're sat around and someone uses the values to kind of describe someone, or they're just, saying like, oh, that's such a move fast, break things way of doing things or something.
Okay.
It's such a good way of creating those intentional micro moments that embed your EVP and like really help to build that culture. And I think some things that we've been trying a lot of is experimenting with different ways of doing that. I know like some people like to have kudos or shout outs channel. And we actually do awards every year for our um, summer and Christmas to get everyone together, the whole company, do literally an awards ceremony where we're rewarding people for those values and really trying to think of other ways to really live them. So at Sideways 6, they had always be learning was one of the values. And so every Friday to kind of end the week, we'd have like beers and cheers. Everyone gets together to celebrate, the wins of the week, but also they'd bring in learning. So it's like really embedding like learning as the foundation of our, who we are. And also we do these lunch and learns. And what I really liked about those lunch and learns is they started evolving. So they started off as what many companies would have as their lunch and learns, to understand a little bit more about what each team's working on, or a special project that they want to share, or if someone's gone to a conference recently and bringing back those learnings. But it really evolved and became a beast of its own. So we did them fortnightly, and you'd find, some people volunteered, some people were encouraged. Everyone was encouraged to do at least one a year. But they'd gone from, specifically work-related lunch and learns to learning about everything and anything. Someone did an incredible one on music covers that you didn't know were covers, and kind of did it in a quiz form and the way they did it. Yeah, it was great. And then you had, a team who were passionate about Formula One. They were like, okay, here's all about Formula One. I learned a lot. I don't know anything. Now I do. Oh, I didn't know anything. Now I do. But it really became a beast of its own. And that was, how ritual should be. And that's how you really embed your values and that culture. And particularly, for a remote team, those touch points need to be, more so embedded, because you're not going to be having those water cooler moments where you're sat around the kitchen or listening to someone's conversation. So how do you artificially create that? It starts small, and then you hope that it will get picked up and become part of their sort of everyday way of working.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? Making it so you're not having to intentionally say it every time or make sure that everybody is following the value, because it gets repetitive and probably quite annoying if you really aren't bothered about the value. It's just a word that they've added in to make a word be there. But I think, yeah, if they're actually living this value, it doesn't become like much of an effort for the HR team to push, because it means that that's actually a value that they believe in as well. And I think that helps to create moments, as you said, inside the business, but also outside, because it can create different, as remote teams, it can be a little bit harder to create those like work friend, best friends. And if you know someone that actually is really good, interested in F1, and so are you, then it gives you a whole different way to speak to that person and be involved in that and learn different things. Or if you were maybe a bit interested and wanted to learn a little bit more, it gives you another sort of way in as well. Because, yeah, sometimes remote calls may be a little bit difficult to get to know people and get there. But if you've got this other way of acknowledging that, oh, actually, we do have more things in common that we thought, and being able to experience that through a value of just being able to learn, I think that's a really nice touch point, and it helps to bring up those remote people a little bit closer than those water cooler moments that they may not have access to. So I think that's a really nice way, and you can then, it gives you the opportunity to, as you said, it's like a customer. So you're identifying those moments and you're bringing that into using those values as a way to connect. in a different way. I think that's really nice. But as we're sort of speaking about this employee journey then, and those moments and values that sort of are brought through that journey, is there a moment where mapping this employee journey has helped you to spot or solve a friction point within that journey?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I try to do is I will score each of those areas every quarter on how well we think we're doing by like adding metrics to each of the areas. So obviously for recruitment, it's relatively easy. You can, measure the number of candidates that you're attracting, you can measure time to hire and so on. But when you're thinking about like onboarding or maybe like the growth area, it can sometimes be a bit trickier. So it's really thinking about how can we convert some of these like touch points into actual hard metrics. So for example, for growth, we have a learning budget. And so one of the metrics that we've used is uptake of the learning budget. So how many people are actually living this is that side of six, they'll always be learning value by using the learning budget that we give them. And by adding that in, knowing that that's a benefit that we gave, that was actually quite attractive to people. It's really funny when we were making offers to people. Like that was one of the benefits that really brought in a lot of people. They were really interested in it. They were asking loads of questions of how it's spent, other people's examples of what they've used it for. And yet you'd follow that same person about a year in and they've not touched it. They're not even looking at their budget. So a good way to kind of really spot these trends was really understanding what were the touch points, but then how do we measure those? And so the learning budget one was a prime example where the reason we tried to figure out like what is the why. So rather than just think, okay, no one's using the learning budget, let's send out comms, take loads of actions. We have to really go back and start with why. So Simon Sinek's Start With Why was one of the books that was always on my desk to help me think like a product manager. So really break down like the understanding of like what is the actual problem and I felt we're trying to fix. And so we started by doing these employee interviews in particular, understanding that what was the reason that people weren't taking up the learning budget. First asking were they aware that we had a learning budget and were they aware of how much that they accrued. But then, do they know how to access it? Asking a few of those like general questions and then asking, if they haven't used them, why. We found that mostly it's just that people forgot and didn't know that it existed. We weren't really reminding people. You kind of see it at the beginning, and it wasn't really something which we kind of gave people enough awareness on, I guess. Or they didn't know what to spend it on. So they didn't have, those ideas or suggestions for themselves. So, as a team, what we did is we took all of that information. Mostly those are the two biggest, reasons that they weren't taking it. So we'd come up with little ideas and plans and just gave them a little one pager, kind of point them in the right direction as to how they can spend these things. But also spoke to the managers to weave in their one-on-ones a little bit about the personal development. So that what were the things they were interested in inside and outside of work that they'd like to learn more on. Just ask that one question at our one-on-ones. And just by asking that one question, what we realized is that managers weren't having necessarily all these conversations all the time. Some were, some weren't with their employees. But by introducing these kind of questions about their personal development, it helped the employees start to think about actually, what do I want? Rather than being told the next stage of your career is manager level 2 versus 1. They were actually thinking, what did they want? And how can we build a personal growth plan for them in the business? Which incidentally meant that we were able to retain more people because you can't just keep adding hierarchy when you're a small business. but also we increased internal mobility by 20%. And we actually found some people moving from, initial what was in sales as an example into customer success, or from solutions engineering into engineering, like all of these different ways of growing your career with breadth, with low cost to us as a business, and keeping people engaged. We're all just because of asking an additional little question in your one-on-ones, or thinking about learning that value.
Yeah, I think that's such a good thing because, yeah, it's funny when people are interviewing, they'll probably say a lot more stuff about like the benefits to show that they've researched it to get the job, which is good because it shows that they are taking a look at the careers page, they're looking at the business and they are doing their work. But when it comes down to it and looking at the individual person and they're not using it, it's nice to sort of take a step back and think, okay, what are the reasons? Because I think a lot of people can speak about their goals and what they want to do, but it's sometimes it's quite like widespread. It's like, oh, what do you want to do in the next 12 months? And it's like, oh, get a promotion.
Yeah.
Or like, it's like, but then looking at on an individual basis and like asking on a personal level. And I think the pressure sometimes of them asking you, not like a harsh pressure, but a pressure of being like, no, where do you actually want to be? Is there anything that we can do or you can do that will grow that in the next month? I think having like those timescales of pressure of how about in 6 months, what do you want to achieve? And if you haven't achieved that, why haven't you achieved that? Is there anything that we could have done, or could you have used this learning budget in that 6 months? And if they know that it's there to be used, and those like little talking points or prompts that those managers can say every so often, have you used a learning budget? Like you said, you were struggling with time management. Why don't you just do a time management course and see if you learn anything from it? Because you're not going to like lose the benefit of not using it. You're only going to gain something if you were maybe struggling with it. So I think that's nice to assess that people, yeah, and then also forgetting about it, because that's a key thing as well. Everyone thinks it's a really good, nice to have, and then they get down to it, and because they're on their laptops working for say the day, then once they close it, they don't think about learning more sometimes. So I think having a lot in that space in your day to learn is key, to rather than having like that after work, because I think sometimes that's tough as well. If there's a course on which is 6 till 8, it can be a bit difficult because people are like, well, I've already been working from 9 till 5 and now I have to log on and do another course. But if you block out a time in your day, say when a focus time to focus on creating a better social media strategy or a better sales pitch for a specific product that you want, and aligning and assigning yourself some time for that, and using the budget that they've given you, it's only going to make you better. And then if you're a salesperson, it's going to make the product you're selling better, or the social page that you're showcasing better. So I think it's a really nice thing there. It's making sure that people know it's there to be used, but also helping them get there as well, because people do sometimes need a little bit of push in the right direction, but once they get there, and they've learned something afterwards, it's a really good feeling to know that you've learned something, and then putting that into action as well, I think helps to do it. And that's exactly how mapping this employee journey, like the sort of product roadmap, really helps you to spot those pain points. I think that's a really nice way to delve in. And like you said, the data that you can find out of this, and asking the people why that's happened, that really does help you shape what you do with that story. So yeah, I really like that story. I think it gives a really good example of that journey and those friction points. We're sort of looking at this journey. So from an open sort of journey, what that looks like as the product lifestyle, those different moments, why they matter, the how to spot that friction. But I know we touched on it really, but as like sort of remote performance as design challenges, I think having these frameworks can definitely help with sort of remote employees. So is there anything that, if we are looking at this sort of journey, is there anything that you've maybe intentionally removed or redesigned from your onboarding or the performance process, and why?
Yeah, I think for the performance process for sure. Doing the I used to do the traditional sort of 9 box grid and then have a guide and get the managers to kind of like tell me like performance is a continuum. Right? There may be a point at time where someone's not performing, but at home it's because they've had very little sleep and they've got a newborn and it's just a moment in time for them. It may be consistent and we need to pay attention to it, but it is a continuum. Like we're not always firing on all cylinders at all points. And the 9 box grid is a good example of a tool that is really easy to use for managers, for performance management, for seeing like where people are. What I have found though is when working with the remote teams, um, a lot of the time the managers just defaulted to the middle. They're like, it's just the middle one because when you need to give a little bit more attention to someone to help them, you're giving them a lot more time. And the managers were often feeling a bit fatigued about being on calls constantly and sometimes didn't have we didn't give them, I guess, the right tools to have the right types of conversations when they were having the touch points with employees when it's remote. Whereas in the office, because and this is when we're hybrid, because it's very exposing, you're in the office, everyone can see, is a lot harder to hide. And so managers do spend a little bit more time kind of looking at the performance of those team members because obviously they're being told about it as well from others. And so I we kind of revamped that. We thought like there's something wasn't working, and it was the assumption was it's then managers aren't spending enough time with the remote employees, or that there wasn't enough understanding what good looks like. But that was wrong.
Yeah.
Actually. We ended up looking at, as we would do with a normal project, get all the data, do the employee interviews, um, understanding like what is the actual problem that we were trying to solve. Like, why is this uh, discrepancy existing? And what we ended up finding was the process wasn't consistent. So we had a really very thorough, robust 9 box process. Like it was really clear. But actually, that wasn't the problem. The problem was educating people on the process and getting them to use it in a consistent manner. When you're in the office, you have a constant physical reminder of someone that you're then able to kind of, oh, remember, okay, I need to fill out something for this person. Whereas for the remote team, they weren't necessarily getting that nudge. So how can we ensure that we're giving everyone the right tools to use it? And we found that actually the 9 box is quite complicated. Let's just strip it down. We threw it out. And we started with a 4 box grid. And so it's really simple. Like 4 box is someone's underperforming and we're not sure that they're going to actually deliver. They have loads of potential, but they may be new in the role. They haven't quite hit their flow yet. Or someone's performing pretty well and consistently, or someone's in need of promotion. We make it really, really simple.
Yeah.
And we then, because it's 4, they can't hide in the middle. There's no middle value for them to just hide away from. So they had to kind of choose where someone sat, which was quite nice and simple. And also made it really easy for them to give us that information. So we would have a little nudge that came through our HRIS. We had to do it, but then there was reminders if they didn't do it. And it was, and then I'd have a follow up each time with each of the managers. It really made it super simple, but it really increased adoption. And so you weren't getting people left out. And the big thing was that I would always share trends, obviously anonymized, in all hands as another reminder of like, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it to help everyone. So we can help you all kind of grow and deliver your best work. But also we mentioned that it fed into the end of year reviews. So these are things that we were, constantly needing, but it feeds into the end of year reviews. This was just to managers because this is a manager tool for their employees, so we can see how that they're going. But it basically, by making it super simple and explaining that it's going to help them in the long run when we do the end of year reviews, which are for everyone. There's no way of doing it where it isn't work. It is work, but the point of it is that it should be work, because what we're trying to do is really help set people up for success for the next year. So you need to put in that work. But by explaining all of that, we made it and making it consistent and same for everyone, so they couldn't add in additional points. It was very consistent for every single person. It increased adoption, but it also made it a fairer. So remote people weren't getting unfair disadvantage compared to people in the office. But I do feel like the other thing that we've learned through working and setting up with the remote team in particular was it was more important at the very beginning to establish how people like information. So everyone, we've all worked with managers who kind of send, look, when you start talking to them, they're going to send back to you that just put it in an email. They just want things written down. There's some people that just like bullet points. There's some people who like visuals. People learn differently. They absorb information differently. What we've learned is that working with remote people in particular is understanding how they absorb information first. And so then when I'm trying to push a new people initiative or do anything, I'm hitting all of those ways of learning. So often you'll have the same piece of information from me. It might be the same policy or it might be the same change that we're making, both written in Slack, mentioned in all hands or any of the all company get-togethers with a Loom video and a reminder later on via email. So I'm trying to hit every single point so everyone can absorb that information in the way that they need to be able to adopt it and think about it and to get the buy-in. And I always just use the same principles. So it is what, why, and then the how. So what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then the how, the process. So really, most of the time I've noticed people lead with the how, they lead with the process and what we're changing and what we're doing, but there's no kind of context behind it. So we really try to stay at the beginning, like what's the problem and what are we doing to stop and what we're doing to solve it, and like the why around the method that we've chosen and how we're going to implement it.
Yeah, no, I really like this. I think you forget that by not being constantly surrounded by people, especially in a working environment, that constant reminder does help you to do certain things, because if you're in an office and you're having to complete a task for someone and you see them walk past and you're like, oh no, I haven't done it yet. So it's like, that's the reminder. So you do it and then you're being proactive. So that's then complete by the day. Whereas if you're at home and maybe you haven't got it in your calendar or you're not speaking to them for another 3 weeks remotely on a call, or it's maybe not pressing enough, then you're not going to do that. And that maybe teams like, well, why hasn't they done that yet? They had 3 weeks to do it. It's like, well, actually, I completely forgot about it. And now I've seen you in my calendar. I now have to rush and do it. So they're then thinking that maybe you're underperforming, but yeah, you just didn't have that constant reminder there. And I think having these 4 blocks really do help shape, just making it a lot more simpler, creating like something like a Notion document with a table in that you can see like from Q1 to Q4, for example, and say, okay, here's you in Q1 and you've just started your role. Yeah, maybe you are new in the role, but you're underperforming in these things, but you're really doing well in these things. How can you reach this level to this level? So by the end of the year, maybe you are in the 3rd to the 4th box. So I think having those touch points saying you are in this box, maybe for documenting you are not doing as well, but in speaking and doing the project itself, you really are exceeding. So you can physically see what you're doing wrong and where you're heading and how you can progress. Because I think, as you said, people can learn in different ways. So if you can see that physically you've got those boxes, but then also visually that if you have more bullet points in the end box, you're closer to a promotion, showcasing that in the all hands and demonstrating that in the different videos and things, and making sure that with this regular sort of async reflection, they can go back into that document and think, okay, but actually I feel like I've got a lot better than I was, let's say, 3 months ago. Let's take a look. And it's like, oh yeah, I've definitely done better now. And like constantly evaluating yourself, because you're like, oh, actually, if I can do that, that, and that now, my manager's going to think I'm close to a promotion, which is what everybody
Yeah.
wants. So really like making that so simple so that people can understand how they can progress. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that helps to redesign a process, especially for remote teams that maybe you thought was something that would help them, because it's like, well, actually, you've got all 9 of these blocks. Like, what else can you want? We're giving you everything. And it's like, actually, this is just too much information. Some people, it's nice just to have something that's a lot more simplified that you can easily work through, that you can like constantly go back and reflect and have those challenges and wins that you can assess yourself, and have maybe a monthly update. What are your wins of this month, and adding those in there as well and reflecting on that. So I really like that. I think that helps to, especially with remote performance, it helps to see where people are at, because it can be difficult. So I really like that. But I also think that's bringing it back to these touch points, because you're touch pointing on what are they happy with in the role, maybe what's the performance of that person, the review, or as you said, the promotion, and these sparks of joy, I think, is a really nice saying that you've been using today. So what would you say the sort of one, either like touch point or like a design, let's say a design touch point that could get really good feedback but is easy to implement?
That's a very good question. I would probably say like onboarding is a really easy way to kind of spark joy, and get that kind of quick wins. It's making
Mm.
sure that you know that they feel safe from that day one, and so that they have things planned out, little things like ensuring that they know like when the first meeting is, who they're meeting, and having those that diary for their day one is not scary or empty. Like that's a really easy quick win. But one that I think people forget actually is just once someone's in the business, what are the ways that we can kind of keep them growing and feeling
Yeah.
inspired, and those kind of sparks of joy. I actually really think, again, this is all back down to the rituals, but I think like kudos, like tokens of just giving someone that pat on the back and saying you've done a great job, but is really, really great. And I really like doing it in a sort of old school way, like sending them a little card and having their manager send a card just to say, like, this, you did a great job here. This was amazing. We used to do that quite a lot. And just they're really easy, low cost to do, but just posting a little card to them. It comes after the fact. You can still have a kudos channel and so on in Slack or whatever communication tool you use. But the idea that one, like a little bit later down the line, they're going to get a card that has this little moment that they've done to spark joy for other people in the post is just really nice. And I really think that's a nice quick win. And that's one that like, people always kind of keep, and they always mention it in the exit interviews of how that was quite a meaningful moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's key, isn't it? Recognition. Just it makes you feel so good, and it makes, if you're putting a lot of work into something and you're actually being recognized at the end of it, it makes you want to do more of that good work. And that's what the business wants out of you. They want to be able to see that you want to do more. And I think those little moments are really nice. And also from a personal thing, at Remote First yesterday, so it was my birthday, they sent through a thank box, and they got everyone in my team and sent it out to a few other people that I've been working closely with. And I got loads of like nice messages about the work that I've done so far, and they're so happy that I'm in the team and stuff. And I was like, that's so nice. I showed like my partner and my mom, and you show them that to people because you're actually really proud of yourself, just to be like, oh, what a nice company. And when you get something like that, that's a nice token of like thoughtfulness, that what you've done has actually helped them, it's a nice feeling. So I think these little things, I know the thank boxes can be like a free online thing that you can send as well to remote teams. So that having that, I think it's like the written words is just so nice to read, isn't it, about yourself? So yeah, I really like that. And it's as you said, it's really easy just to implement and help with that feedback. So it's specific to that person and they know that they've helped someone and they've helped their work do better. So yeah, I really like that. And then also, as we are speaking about remote teams, I know sparks of joy and these touch points can be a little bit more difficult, but how do you keep people feeling connected in a distributed team?
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be tricky because like you miss things sometimes, but I always try to do it with building in and mentioned it before, but like those rituals, those consistent ways of having touch points um, to make them feel sort of connected. We do a lot of kind of artificial water cooler moments as well. So I know in Slack there's an app called Donut. It's free. It can pair people up at random. We do 15-minute donuts. Everyone in the company, including the CEO, will go and like join this, get paired up with someone. They have example sort of questions, kind of get to know you questions and so on. It takes tiny time out of your day, but it gives you that connection, be able to have that with someone. We try with the online games. Everyone seems to be competitive, which is quite a nice thing because it's a good way to get people on board, whether you're playing kind of Among Us or whatever it is. And then one thing that I really love that the culture committee actually introduced was doing like quizzes, but created by the culture committee about the company. So unusual facts that they'd learned from different people and kind of built that into our kind of quizzes once a quarter. And they always go down a storm. So I think things like that are a nice way to kind of build that connection. Um, However, I will also say nothing beats those twice a year moments where the whole company gets together physically in person.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, we have the donut chats here as well. I used that. I got selected last week and spoke to a girl who's based in Egypt, and it's like the culture and everything is so different. We were speaking about her wedding that she'd recently gone to, and I was speaking about my wedding that's going to be coming up, and it's so nice understanding someone's culture in a completely different way. She's on the offboarding team, so maybe a team that I wouldn't speak to so often, and it's so nice to have those and the hints of questions. What's your favorite food? Your favorite place to travel to? Your favorite movie? I think it's a nice way of speaking to people that you wouldn't usually speak to before. I spoke to on a previous podcast as well with Stephen. He said that there was a moment that with these meetups, they found that there was a group of people and they were all speaking to each other, and people were like, how do they all know each other? And it was because they shared a taxi from one venue to the next,
No.
and they were all yeah, and they were all laughing about something that had happened in the taxi, and it was completely four random people that would never be seen together in random teams, and they actually grew really close just from the taxi ride. So it's nice, as you say, like these moments being with each other and unintentional moments of spark that joy. So I think having intentional these donut chats, but also definitely meeting up in person, it's a nice balance of both there. So yeah, thanks for just going into a little bit more about the remote side of things. I think it's nice to touch on that and how you can easily implement things as well. But I guess sort of summarizing where we've been speaking to and what we've been speaking about from the sort of whole journey there, is there a piece of feedback that you'd say? I know we spoke about analysing that data and going through that, but is there a time or a piece of feedback which completely reshaped a program that you were actually rolling out?
Yeah, I think this happens a lot actually. But we've done it when we were looking at career frameworks. That one is a big piece of work and it was already ongoing before I joined. We revamped it and we everyone in the people team in my team have got really excited by what they were building. They'd kind of fallen in love with the process and what they're building, this career framework. We've been asked about it a lot as well prior to me joining. And so I was really proud of the team of what they've done so far, kind of made a few tweaks and we rolled it out. And we basically got some really brutal feedback from the team when we first rolled it out, saying it was too complicated. It was very sticky as well. So there was one employee who, according to the framework, technically thought that they would be a manager because they stuck to these things to the latter versus what we were suggesting. So we really backed ourselves into a corner there, and we ended up rolling it all back. Being very clear, explaining why, said that because these people didn't actually feel like they had any ownership or onus around what they were delivering. This was mostly because we've worked with different managers of different experience levels as well. And so we were taking on gospel some of the suggestions they have for the next stages of the career. And we went straight back to the drawing board and we told everyone that we're going to do this again, but we are going to build this with you. We're going to co-create something that makes sense. And we're going to be working with the managers, but also the employees. And we created these panels and with each of the employees, including their managers in a team, and personas for each of the different departments. And we really helped them create, it was the same core content effectively, but they could add their voice into it. They could pick out some of the problems that maybe we didn't get to see. And we were able to really get high adoption from that once we were rolling it out, once they co-created it. Also, I do think anytime that you include the end user, aka the employee, in a process, the adoption is always going to be higher because they have that piece of ownership. It's like the IKEA effect. Like you always love something that you've made and helped make more than something you've just bought. And so it's similar to this. They've helped make this, so they adopt it. They then become the champion for other people. So so that's something that went up pretty badly, but it ended up in a good position in the end.
Exactly, yeah, and it's using the first thing that you brought out, but also, yeah, if they can become involved in it, and yeah, like that IKEA effect, I think that's so true. If you want a kitchen, but because you've built it yourself and you just put that all together, like I've done that, so it's nice because you've used the core elements of what you've brought in, but they've actually been part of that and shaping that to be where it is. So yeah, I think that's really nice. I think that's a nice way to sort of finally say that having people bring in their little ways of adopting those techniques and then they can then adopt it more, I think is sort of key to where we've come to through this conversation. So I think we've sort of gone through the product launch to journey mapping that entire employee experience, sort of making sure that you're designing it with intention, looking at all those touch points, making sure that these frameworks maybe aren't so rigid for these remote teams to sort of adopt that and create different paths for different people. Exactly like you said, building rituals. I think this is key to making people adopt and understand those values and those sparks of joy, which I really am enjoying with this conversation. The sparks of joy help you to understand and gain confidence and progress in your career and your roles. So I think I'll finish with two quick fire as we can be questions, but I think you could probably go on for quite a while with them. But I'm thinking we've looking at the employee experience as a sort of journey, then if you could redesign one part of the employee experience across all tech companies, what would it be?
Oh, if I could redesign, I think is just from my experience because I haven't seen a great one yet. But I would love to redesign exit to be as beautiful as onboarding. It just is always messy.
Yeah.
It's always clunky. There's always something that goes wrong at one point. And oh, excuse me. But if we can make it as beautiful as the end, as when you onboard, I think that would be my dream, because these people are then going to be your advocates. They're your alumni. They should have a beautiful end to a business, and thanks for everything we've done.
Yeah, that's so nice, I think, because it's every chapter, isn't it? You open one door, you close another, and I think that completely shapes how they felt about your business in the first place. So I think that's really nice. And then finally, then, just to get our listeners thinking a little bit more, what is your one controversial belief with all things, let's say, HR?
One thing that I think that is probably a bit controversial is, everyone always says bring your whole self to work. I actually believe that that is not true. I don't think you should. I think that that actually can be a bit toxic, because it means that, like, come to work even when you're feeling crap, even when you're struggling, even when you've got loads of stuff going on. I actually think you shouldn't bring your whole self to work. Bring your best self to work. And if you're not feeling at your best, take the time to step away and be you, and then fix whatever's going on, rather than feel the pressure to, like, come in and bring everything. So yeah, not everyone agrees with that, but I vehemently believe, like, it's your best self, and otherwise take the time for you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, as a people team, they should be doing, looking after their people. And if you're on your full self, then you're not going to do well in the job and the day to day work that you're doing. It's only going to elongate how you're feeling. So, yeah, I also agree with that. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a good conversation. I honestly think we could keep speaking for hours and hours, and I know definitely you could as well. Thank you so much for bringing such light on this conversation, crafting people experiences like product features. I think it's been really good. You've shone light on a lot of different things that I actually didn't know, and I love all the stories that you've told to sort of get us here. So thank you so much, Selina. And thank you so much for our listeners for tuning in. If you've got any questions about anything further, you can obviously get in touch with Selina or myself or Mo first. And tune in to the next Freedom of Work podcast. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again.